Did you know that there is a single company controlled by the banks that owns just about every single share of every single stock on the market? This secretive company that you've never heard of controls a whopping $87.1 trillion of stocks. And to make it even spookier, it was founded by the CIA. We'll also be talking about a new Israeli blackmail operation involving the Vatican, Peter Thiel, Palantir, and our technocratic future, where Big Brother is always watching. Welcome back to Candace. All right, our first story today is both mind-blowing and instructive. It gives us a window into how the CIA recruits people, covertly funds entire arms of our government, and shapes the world from behind the curtain. We'll meet one of the founders of USAID and spend time in the early NSA, but not that NSA, a different intelligence agency linked NSA. But ultimately, this story is about the $100 trillion company and how the CIA may secretly own and control the entire stock market. And I mean that more or less literally. The CIA might actually own just about every stock on the market, including all the shares in all of your retirement and investment accounts. This is the story of the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. It starts with William Dentzer, who was born in 1929 at the start of the Great Depression in Rochester, Pennsylvania, to two middle-class Christians. I haven't found anywhere in his biographies or interviews where he talks about how incredibly hard those times were on his family, and they were probably hard. But reading between the lines, to me, it seems like they did okay in the middle class. In college, he wound up attending the first Congress of the U.S. National Student Association, the NSA. Over the years, he got more and more involved in the NSA until he was elected the NSA's fifth president in 1951. Now, if you haven't heard of the National Student Association, it was a famous CIA cutout, meaning the CIA was funding it, and they did so all through the 50s and 60s. Its purpose was to infiltrate, spy on, and influence the rising student movements of the anti-war era. At the time, the US government was deeply concerned about Soviet and communist influence infiltrating America through our youth and universities. And though this fear wasn't entirely without merit, it yielded little to no results that were tangible. At least, not towards its stated goal of rooting out communist and Soviet infiltration. They did a great job of enacting secret programs to unlawfully spy on Americans with programs like Operation Mockingbird, Chaos, COINTELPRO, Minaret, Shamrock, just to name a few. This included everything from reading people's mail and co-opting the press, all the way to trying to convince Martin Luther King Jr. to commit suicide. Crazy story. If you haven't heard it, look up the letter they sent to him trying to convince him to off himself. It is publicly available, and it's even on the Wikipedia page for COINTELPRO. Technically, it was an FBI program, but we're getting distracted. So, back to Dentzer. After traveling the world for the NSA and likely serving as an unwitting CIA asset for several years, they finally came out to him and told him that they had been funding the entire organization all along, and that they would continue to do so. This was all groovy with Dentzer, who later enrolled in the military and was immediately swooped up by the CIA, where he served for a total of 5 years before leaving. And obviously, once he left the CIA, he was done working for them. Totally never worked for them again. Because then, he became the special assistant to the first head of USAID. Yes, the one that recently got caught with its pants down sending condoms and dildos to Uganda or whatever it was. Now, the whole USAID Doge scandal was pretty fishy and felt a lot like a publicity stunt. But one thing that is pretty well indisputable is that USAID has long been an intelligence agency cutout designed to launder government money around the world and fund secret programs abroad. Dentzer then became the special assistant to the U.S. coordinator for the Alliance for Progress, which was another USAID-style organization that Kennedy had cooked up before his death. This is a clip from the Congressional Record in 1965, now housed in the CIA reading room online. And it says, quote, The Alliance for Progress was devised not to suppress the demand for change, but to aid it and direct it in certain paths. That is, the message the Department of Defense and the Central Intelligence Agency have not yet understood. The Alliance for Progress is intended to change the status quo in Latin America. We are pouring $1 billion a year of private and public money into that endeavor, yet the Defense Department and the CIA spend millions more trying to offset the alliance and to forestall its purposes. So, reading between the lines, this sounds a bit like our boy Jack Kennedy in covert war with an out-of-control CIA, starting his own intelligence-style operations to reshape Latin America in his own image. Now, I bet that there are some in the audience that know more about the Alliance for Progress than I do that can drop some knowledge for us in the comments, and please do. But anyways, after the assassination of Kennedy and shifts in Denser's worldview and priorities, he came home and moved into the banking sector, intent on changing things here in America. And he had some noteworthy and powerful friends like Eugene Black and Governor Nelson Rockefeller, who appointed Denser in 1970 to succeed him as the New York State Superintendent of Banks. In this role, he became New York's chief regulator of banking and financial markets. That's a position that the banks and financial institutions have always cultivated a cozy relationship with, for obvious reasons, even though technically he is the cop that's supposed to be keeping them in line. And during this time, the financial system was in turmoil. This is a quote from an article about that time in history in the financial system. In the days before computerized trading and a centralized electronic stock delivery system, the street depended on messengers tasked with trudging up and down Wall Street to deliver paper stock certificates by hand. By 1968, daily trading volume hit 12 million shares a day. The sheer mass of stock certificates and other paperwork overwhelmed many Wall Street back offices, the groups working behind the scenes to settle and clear trades. That is a picture of a dude literally sweeping stock slips off the floor of the stock exchange after a day of trading. 12 million shares traded a day is ludicrous. All of those shares of stock are written down on slips of paper and traded by hand by brokers on the stock exchange floor. But frequently, with that much trading, many of those shares would fail to be delivered on time, or even ever at all. And those fails to deliver that it mentions in that article, those became a feature of the market, not a bug, because it is extremely convenient to the financial institutions that run the markets to be able to say, whoopsies, we failed to deliver that stock that you bought, but don't worry, we'll be sure to get it to you someday. This would be a key principle leading up to and enduring ever since the 2021 GameStop squeeze. But anyways, the market was growing rapidly, and the volume of trading was getting so out of control that they established a committee called BASIC to study the problem and issue a solution. The solution that they came up with was to enter all the stocks into a computerized system, and rather than trading the real stocks, you would leave all the real stocks in one place and just trade around digital notes that said you owned them. For whatever reason, they wrote into this change that you wouldn't actually own them. You would just have what is called beneficial ownership. They would actually be owned by this one central corporation that would keep them all safe for you. And you would just trade your little funny money all around. A lot like fiat money, if you've been down the money isn't real rabbit hole. So William Denser was intimately involved in the founding of this new corporation, and then he became its first chairman and CEO. And thus was born the Depository Trust Company, the DTC. They made sure to put the word trust in there just in case you were confused and thought you couldn't trust all these banksters to be on the straight and narrow. Not foreshadowing at all. It would be regulated by the SEC and the Federal Reserve because they had the bright idea to make it a private corporation instead of a government agency. Can't imagine why. Denser wound up serving as chairman and CEO for 22 years. By the time he retired in 1994, the DTC held $7.7 trillion worth of securities, i.e., the shares of stock and the like. But today, on their website, the DTC says that they have custody of more than 1.4 million active securities issues valued at a total of $87.1 trillion. And they just say it right there out in the open. In their most recent annual report, they published some insane numbers. In 2024, they processed $3.8 quadrillion worth of securities. On average, every day last year, they processed $2.2 trillion worth of trades every single day. These are numbers that the human mind really cannot even process. So, to help us, I want to refer to one of my all-time favorite visuals. Shout out to demonocracy.info. Don't know about the name, but this was published years ago, and it lives rent-free in my head to this day because it is hard to understand numbers this big, and visualizing it like this really helps. So, to start, we all know what a $100 bill theoretically looks like, right? If you stack a little stacky stack of them, you get $10,000. Very small stack. You make a whole pallet of them and you have $100 million. Solid $100 bills, wall to wall, bottom to top. Put 10 of those pallets together and you've got $1 billion, okay? So we're counting it up. If you want to visualize $1 trillion, the semi-truck down there is just for scale. You can see the person next to the pallet, next to the square of pallets, next to the semi-truck. And then when you zoom out and you look at the entire tower on the left there, from the very bottom to the very top, that whole skyscraper is filled wall to wall, end to end, bottom to top with solid $100 bills. That is how much money $1 trillion is, okay? That tower is 465 feet tall, approximately 43 stories high, about 40 feet to a side. That's a lot of money. So, to contextualize this number that the DTC is putting out, every day, the DTC trades 2 skyscrapers of solid $100 bills every single day. Just want to work your way up so you can visualize how big this is going to get, because these are double stacked towers, twice as tall as the ones you saw on the last graphic. Notice the pallet and the person in each image. The person is pretty much too small to see, okay? These are quadruple stacks. Notice the tiny Statue of Liberty way at the end of the line. You may barely be able to see the tiny speck that is the pallet with $100 million on it. All of these towers are solid, wall to wall, bottom to top, all $100 bills. This is what $1 quadrillion looks like. So, last year, the DTC processed $3.8 quadrillion of trades. Like when your ass cousin bought weed stocks, that's the kind of trades we're talking about. But that means that you multiply this entire graphic by 3.8 times, and that is how much money is changing hands at the DTC. And it's all being processed and overseen by this one company that no one has heard about, that was founded by a CIA agent. In that annual report, they also mention that they're sitting on $72 trillion of mortgage-backed securities. You know, the things that caused the global financial collapse in 2008 when everyone got too carried away milking the free money spigot for all it was worth, and then making off with massive taxpayer bailouts to pay their bonuses? Yeah, so it's safe to say that this corporation that you've never heard of is insanely important and insanely powerful. And it was founded by a CIA spook in collaboration with all the biggest financial institutions in America. To this day, it is still run by the same crowd. When you look at the board of directors, just about every major financial institution is represented. And let me explain what you're looking at here. These are from my personal notes. And what I do is I just go and look up the board of directors and I read through their biographies on the official website, and they mention, because they're trying to brag about it, all their past work history. And so then I go out and I just get little graphics of where they've worked just so we can visualize the types of relationships that these board members have, current and past, on their resumes, right? And when you look through their board of directors, you see all the biggest financial institutions and most of the regulators, like the FDIC and FINRA, but also the SEC, Apex Fintech Solutions, Davis Polk. The list goes on and on with names like JP Morgan, Citadel Securities, Goldman Sachs, Citi, TD. We talked about BCG last week. And you could really just rabbit hole down this stuff for days and days and days. And I did. Virtue is a big name. HSBC, big name. BNY Mellon. We've even got the oil companies on here. But there's a couple of things that I want to note. SIFMA, SIFMA, is a lobbying organization that lobbies on behalf of all of these guys. The OCC, the CFTC, those are both regulatory agencies. Okay? I just show you all this to make the point that it's a big club, and you're not in it. But they're all good buddies with the regulators that are supposed to be making sure there's no funny business going on with our stock markets. Of course, when you go look up the board of directors at a place like FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, their board has veterans of Vanguard and Morgan Stanley on it. But then again, they are what is referred to as a self-regulatory agency. And when you start looking into how our financial system actually works, it's completely bonkers how much of it is made up of self-regulatory organizations. Meaning, I'm sure that these bankers and financiers will police themselves and make sure no one breaks any laws. Because after all, why would a banker ever even break a law? Just look at Gary Gensler, the chair of the SEC for the last 4 years. He worked at Goldman Sachs for 18 years. Every door on Wall Street is a revolving door. And they don't hide it. They brag about how much financial experience all of these stooges have. Another great example of a crazy conflict is from 2021 when the GameStop folks noticed that the global head of operations of Citadel Securities is on the board of the DTC, the company that's supposed to be overseeing all the stocks in the market. Now, this is a little in the weeds, but because the DTC are in charge of issuing everyone's shares of stock, it's not too complicated of a job, theoretically. But then, when everyone noticed that the public numbers were showing that more than double the number of shares in existence had been borrowed for short selling, i.e., selling something that you don't actually own, alarm bells started going off. How is that even remotely possible? Pretty quickly, everyone figured out that no one owns any stock. We are actually all what is called beneficial owners. And that means that we get to play pretend with our little monopoly money and it works fine. But if the ever hits the fan, in reality, you don't own it. The DTC does. And in the world of the stock market, these definitions matter. And so the freaking retards online found this crazy obscure loophole that it's legal for anyone to take their shares out of the DTC's custody and register them directly in their own name with GameStop's transfer agent. It's all a little nerdy and a little confusing, but in about a year and a half, yes, I am proudly a part of this statistic, we took about a third of the company's shares off of the public market and stashed them all away so they couldn't be used in this corrupt, manipulative system. People even started making rocket ship graphics and counting up how much the company had been taken off the market, and people were creating multiple ways of tracking it to triangulate against one another, and it was a whole deal. But it was a big deal. GameStop investors realized that all this shady stuff going on, this naked short selling and swaps and failures to deliver, way too much fraud to get into, it all pointed back at the DTC, the giant financial institutions that mostly all sit on its board, and the regulators that are asleep at the wheel, also on its board. The call is coming from inside the house, but they can't hear the phone over the sound of their money printers. Oh yeah, and that whole centralized system, it was set up by a CIA agent who also was integral to the founding of USAID. What a weird coincidence. Next, we're going to get into a crazy Israeli blackmail scandal that very few people are talking about. But first, let's get into a few of our sponsors.
We've got trade wars, inflation, global chaos, and a skyrocketing national debt. It's no wonder that gold keeps hitting record highs. With everything going on in the world, thousands of people are diversifying their savings with gold and silver. And they're turning to my gold partner, which is Goldco. Right now, Goldco is offering you a free 2025 gold and silver kit. Plus, you can get unlimited silver if you qualify. Find out how you can help diversify your savings tax and penalty-free. Visit CandaceLikesGold.com or call 855-222-GOLD.
Real quickly, let me tell you about Cozy Earth. Father's Day always sneaks up on us, and every year we ask ourselves, how do you say thank you to the guy who taught you to ride a bike, fixed your flat tire, or sat quietly next to you when life got too heavy? This year, if you want to give something back to the father figure in your life, don't just give a gift, give comfort with my friends at Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth makes insanely soft loungewear and sheets. I'm talking luxury level comfort made from premium viscose bamboo that keeps you cool, cozy, and relaxed. So whether your dad's a napper, a Sunday morning coffee guy, or just someone who deserves a little extra care, Cozy Earth makes comfort that lasts. And this Father's Day, he deserves it. Go to cozyearth.com/Candace and use code Candace for up to 40% off all men's apparel. That's cozyearth.com/Candace, code Candace. For the dads who work hard during their 9 to 5 and deserve the best during their 5 to 9. So, anyways, late last year, a scandal broke out in Italy with some pretty salacious headlines. Vatican, Israel, implicated in Italy hacking scandal, leaked files reveal. The headlines were every conspiracy theorist's wet dream. But in this case, they weren't just salacious headlines. The story went even deeper the more reporting came out. It all centered around an Italian intelligence firm called Equalize, which was officially associated with the Italian government, and thereby it had legitimate access to at least some of the Italian government's databases. Turned out, they've been doing a little side work outside the scope of their mission. Here in some of the reporting about this whole scandal, the words, quote, can hold institutions in hand got used. And this is originally an Italian publication translated into English, and that is a poor Italian translation for they are blackmailing politicians and other government officials. The suspects had often promised and boasted that they could intervene in investigations and processes, giving shades of Diddy and Epstein. It turns out that the hacking tools that they were using was a software called Graphite, and it was developed by an Israeli firm named Paragon. Reporters couldn't help but notice that journalists who had been critical of Israel and the government's handling of alleged anti-Semitism were being targeted. Italian law enforcement had wiretapped the offices of these hackers and recorded meetings between Israeli intelligence operatives meeting with the hackers and tasking them with jobs in exchange for cash. One such conversation involved discussions of a job that was allegedly for the Vatican and allegedly included $1 million of payment. Paragon's graphite technology that they were using is a zero-click hacking tool, much like its predecessor, Pegasus, which means that it can be put onto a target's device entirely without their knowledge. You don't have to click on any sketchy links or pop-ups. There's no notification or detection, and the hackers can gain access to just about anything and everything in your phone or laptop. Most notably, it is capable of hacking encrypted messaging apps like Telegram, Signal, and WhatsApp. This pissed off Meta and Mark Zuckerberg, and they actually threatened to file a lawsuit against the firm, which drew even more media attention to the scandal in the early months of this year. But I want to zoom out and look at a pattern here. This is standard operating procedure for Israel, and they've been doing it for some time. Since at least the early 2010s, this has been their official policy: to move intelligence operations out of government agencies and into the private sector, where private Israeli tech startups can do the government's dirty work. And if they get caught, there is far less blowback onto the government of Israel. No matter the fact that Paragon, this technology they were using to hack everyone, was founded by Ehud Barak, the famous buddy of Jeffrey Epstein and a former chief of Israeli military intelligence. He did so in partnership with 4 other ex-Unit 8200 officers, including the former head of Unit 8200, Ehud Schneerson. Yes, they are both named Ehud. So, Unit 8200 is Israel's NSA, the division of their intelligence services that focuses on hacking, cybersecurity, and signals intelligence, and they are well known to be one of the best in the world. 8200 is the largest single military unit in the IDF, and its alumni are all over the tech world, both in Israel and America, as well as all around the world. All the way back in 2014, Israel's export of cybersecurity products was over $6 billion, exceeding Israeli exports of other military hardware for the first time. All the way back when this article was written, tiny little Israel captured about 10% of the entire global cybersecurity market. And Israel is at the center of the global cyber arms race, not just because Israelis like to spy on people, but because they have a captive population with no government or legal recourse upon which everyone wants to test their new surveillance technologies. The Financial Times goes on to reference an open letter that was published in 2014 in Israeli newspapers and broadcast on Channel 10. In it, a group of 43 serving and former 8200 reservists revealed what they said were coercive spying tactics being used on innocent Palestinians, including the collection of embarrassing sexual, financial, and other information. They're blackmailing the Palestinians, guys. You really can't make this up. Israel controls all imports and exports by land and sea, frequently cutting off electricity, water, food, and other supplies to the country. They've been known to intentionally let in less calories than the population would need to survive at basic nutritional standards. They have a two-tiered justice system where Palestinians can be taken from their homes in the middle of the night and locked in prison without a hearing for months or even years at a time. They've been doing this since long before October 7th. Gaza is very much a Holocaust since October 7th, but the West Bank, in many ways, was just as interesting to the global surveillance industry. Because although the human rights abuses, brutality, and murders aren't always as brazen there, the technocratic nightmare very much is. The West Bank has thousands of cameras installed all over its shattered territories, many of which are supplied by the Chinese company that is blacklisted in the US for helping the Chinese government commit genocide against the Uyghur Muslim population. In the West Bank, these cameras are on every street corner, Israeli vehicle, checkpoint, and scattered all throughout public and sometimes even private spaces. Their explicit goal is facial recognition and digital surveillance. The facial recognition industry is booming, more than doubling since 2020. And a lot of these technologies are being pioneered and tested on Palestinians in the West Bank, where the Israeli government basically has carte blanche to do as it will. They have a program called Blue Wolf, because you gotta sound cool while you do apartheid. Blue Wolf is a database of the entire Palestinian population, their photos, their data, and comprehensive tracking of all of their public movements. They allegedly don't have drones with facial recognition yet. Allegedly. But give it a couple months, and you will have flying robots constantly surveilling the Palestinian people's every move. There are obvious concerns about AI's ability to accurately perform facial recognition on dark-skinned people, and there are numerous examples from around the world of AI directing authorities to go after the wrong person because of this. Just try to search for gorillas in your iPhone's camera roll and see what happens. This concern is frequently brought up in American policing, but to me, that is entirely the wrong conversation to be having because it implies that we consent to this surveillance technology in the first place. Jonathan Hempel said, quote, "What's more, facial recognition technologies increase the power of the state to identify social and political movements, as well as the members of those groups. If the authorities have permission to scan demonstrations and to then identify everyone who participated in them, this will have the effect of deterring people from demonstrating or participating in any form of opposition to the regime, especially in oppressive regimes. This stuff is coming to America, folks. In fact, it's already here, and it's definitely already in Israel. But it's not just being used on Palestinian protesters. It's being used on Israeli citizens as well. Protests calling for Bibi Netanyahu to step down have been raging since long before October 7th, and they have picked back up in a big way in the last year. It's important to remember that not all Israelis are down with what's happening. Many just want to see the hostages returned home. Many want to see the war ended. Others think that Netanyahu isn't being harsh enough in Gaza. But regardless of the reason, if you're in the streets of Israel protesting, Bibi allegedly wanted to deploy these same facial recognition surveillance technologies on you. Recently, the head of Shin Bet, which is Israel's domestic intelligence service, announced that he will be stepping down. And he said that the reason was because Netanyahu allegedly asked him to spy on the anti-government protesters. In his affidavit, he said that it was clear that if there were to be a constitutional crisis, Netanyahu would expect him to obey the prime minister and not the courts. Because Netanyahu has held power in Israel almost uninterrupted since 2009. Everyone always claims that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, but the deep state is very much alive and well over there as well, as much or more as anywhere else in the world. And just like here in America, that deep state is very much okay with harming Israelis and lying to the world to hold on to power. One need look no further than how October 7th went down to see this. It was reported, after the fact, in Israeli media that the government enacted the Hannibal Protocol during the October 7th attack. All those cars did not crumple like that from the light weaponry carried by Hamas fighters. Soldiers were told that, quote, not a single vehicle could return to Gaza from inside Israel, for fear that it would be transporting kidnapped individuals. Which, with just the most basic exercise of logic, means that they were ordered to kill any Israeli hostages in said vehicles before they could cross the border and become hostages. That's not to mention that Israel knew the attack was coming long in advance. This article from the Times of Israel says the top commanders of the Israeli Defense Force were aware in the hours, days, and months that preceded the Hamas-led devastating October 7th onslaught in southern Israel that the Palestinian terror group was drilling intensively for a planned large-scale invasion, and the Hamas leader even said publicly that this was his plan. But the military still didn't act and even diverted forces away from the Gaza front. And yes, despite these reports of Hamas's preparations for attack, 2 companies of troops from the IDF's Commando Brigade that have been stationed on the border of Gaza were inexplicably moved to the West Bank just 2 days before the attack. When the people of Israel and the world started asking too many questions, the investigations into what had happened on October 7th were shut down because it would have been bad for the Israeli military support and public image, I presume. And all of that is not to mention Netanyahu's propping up of Hamas in the first place. There's always a double-edged explanation for these deep state plots, why we need to fund this terror group today, and how we could have never seen terrorism coming tomorrow. And don't mistake my reporting and stance on the government of Israel as support for Hamas or enthusiasm for Sharia law or the Muslim world either. It's all a mess. For example, did you know that across the Arab Middle East today, an average of 45% of married couples are related, usually first cousins? In southern Saudi Arabia, that number is as high as 55 to 70% of marriages are between blood relatives. There have been numerous studies on this done. This NIH meta-analysis put Iraq near the top of the list with an average of 64.6% inbred marriages in Al-Ramadi. I'm not on anyone's side over there. I just want to stop seeing women and children killed by the hundreds and thousands in senseless wars for oligarchs and deep state agendas. And most of all, I want to stop sending our tax dollars to fund it. According to USAID, we have sent almost $320 billion to Israel since it was founded. Right now, since October 7th, our support of Israel's indiscriminate bombing campaigns has surged to new levels with billions more being sent seemingly every few months. All this while America crumbles from within. But the deep state always does more than one thing at a time. And this genocide serves as more than just a money laundering scheme for the globalist Zionist elite. It also is fundamental to their plans for how you will own nothing and be happy very soon. And we're about to talk all about these technocrats and what they've got planned for you. But first, I want to tell you about our sponsor. I want to tell you about Beam. Do you spend your nights tossing and turning, getting terrible sleep, and then dragging yourself through the next day on fumes? If this is you, you need to check out Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values: hard work, integrity, and delivering results. It's a healthy nighttime blend packed with science-backed ingredients shown to improve sleep so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. It's designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling amazing. And unlike other sleep aids, there's no next day grogginess, just great restful sleep. Plus, Dream tastes incredible, and it's become a part of not only my nightly routine, but my team's routine as well. It's simple, easy, and effective. Here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of up to 40% off. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/Ian and use code Ian at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Ian and use code Ian for up to 40% off. Sleep better, wake up stronger, and show up ready for your family, your work, and your country. And now, back to eating the bugs and liking it. The technocratic hellscape that they have planned for you is perhaps best personified by Peter Thiel and Palantir. Peter is part of the aptly named PayPal Mafia, along with his Palantir co-founder, Joe Lonsdale, and Elon Musk is perhaps the best known of the bunch today, but Peter Thiel is no less powerful and perhaps far more dangerous as he slithers around behind the scenes in Washington. We'll have to do another day about how integral he has become to the rise and career of the habitual name changer J.D. Vance. But today, I want to focus on how these surveillance technologies are already here in America and how you are already being watched, cataloged, and prepared for this Orwellian future that they have planned. right now, Palantir is working with ICE to use its biometric and facial recognition capabilities to track and deport illegal immigrants. And that's great. That's always how they start. First, target the group that most of us already want gone. Who, except the far-left crazies, would object to that? Trust us. It's only ever going to be used on terrorists and criminals. Just ignore the fact that all the illegal immigrants are mixed in with the rest of us, so in practice, they're already surveilling all of us to the same degree. Besides, we've already seen the Zionists in the media calling Candace and Tucker and myself and many others foreign assets of Qatar or whoever else. How long is it before anyone who speaks out against the government of Israel, let alone our own government, is labeled a terrorist and put on a list? That's the day that freedom dies. And in case you were wondering how the people in charge of Palantir feel about the weaponization of their technology, here's Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, proud Jewish Zionist, answering that question for you. I quote, "AI is not a toy. It is a weapon," said CEO Alex Karp. "It will be used to kill people." And if you're wondering about Peter Thiel, here he is at the Cambridge Debating Chamber in May of 2024, giving you a little bit of his perspective on the matter.
So what do you think about the use of artificial intelligence or lavender by the IDF in identifying Hamas targets? And secondly, do you agree with Elon Musk about that the population decline is a risk for humanity?
Look, I'm not, without going into all the I'm not on top of all the details of what's going on in Israel because my bias is to defer to Israel. It's not for us to second guess everything, and I believe that broadly the IDF gets to decide what it wants to do, and that they're broadly in the right, and that's sort of the perspective I come back to. And
I mean, it seems to sum up a lot of Zionist perspectives is that they're just broadly in the right. And I just defer to. You should probably practice that script, Peter, because your company is helping them kill civilians. I mean, terrorists. So just work on that bit a little bit. Because in Gaza, it's already being used by the military to target and kill aid workers. In just a few months of this conflict, Israel had targeted and killed more aid workers than had been killed in all wars in the rest of the world over the last 30 years combined, according to The Nation. All the way back in 2013, Edward Snowden revealed how the NSA was helping the Israeli government target and surveil Palestinian Americans who were communicating with relatives back home. I'm sure that Israel totally left their families alone and never used this surveillance for retaliation or blackmail or anything else. This is the modern manifestation of the deep state. The intelligence agencies of today were founded by corporate lawyers, and they partnered with their corporate buddies to overthrow governments all around the world and enslave huge parts of the third world. Then, when they needed a little extra muscle for the dirty work, they turned to organized crime all the way back in World War II, and they've been working together ever since. All of these alliances are specifically designed to create plausible deniability, just as we saw with Epstein. His network was comprised almost entirely of private citizens, just doing their own thing. No matter that multiple were intimately tied to the deepest parts of Israeli military intelligence, no matter that he was bankrolled by one of the most prominent Jewish philanthropists in the world, no matter that all of his operations seemed to target Western nations and benefit Israel, no one ever even seems to mention the fact that Epstein's operation directly overlapped with the timing of September 11th, and an awful lot of unanswered questions that were covered up by people in our own government acting on behalf of some other agenda. This is the modern deep state. And it is a monster that has grown out of the aftermath of World War II into the corruption of just about every facet of Western life today. Everyone has their own theories about who's behind it. Some say it's the Jews, others say it's the Illuminati, or the Masons, or the Jesuits, and I don't know who's in charge. I don't even really care that much. But I do know that they're everywhere and they're in every government, blackmailing everybody to do their bidding. And global technocracy, where we are all slaves to their digital money and debt systems, is their goal. Our best weapon against this tyranny is the truth, and open and honest truth. That's why freedom of speech is non-negotiable. That's why shows like Candace's are so important. And that's why free thinkers like you are so important. And that's why just asking questions is so important. Anyways, that's our show for today. Thanks for tuning in. Please, before you go, like the video, subscribe to Candace's channel, and it's a big help to me if you click on the link in the description to go subscribe to my YouTube channel as well at Ian Carroll Show. We'll be back next week with a story about how they're turning all of us into indentured servants to the elite, more updates from Tiffany's story, and much, much more. Do something nice for someone today, drink some water, and have a great weekend.